I'm Jen Schrader, and this is Behind the Springs, conversations with the people working for you in Colorado Springs, Olympic City, USA. Hi, everyone. We have a small but mighty team at the City of Colorado Springs dedicated to housing and homelessness response. So the leader of that team joined the city just a few months ago, and she has agreed to be my guest on the podcast today. So Amy Cox, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. And so you grew up in Colorado Springs, no stranger to working for the city. I know you've had various roles on the team back in the early 2000s, and you're back now as the Chief Housing and Homelessness Officer, which is, I know, your official title. But tell people kind of what that means, what you do here, and what brought you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You have to talk about yourself.
Yeah, talk about myself.
Yes.
The Chief Housing and Homelessness Officer works with the mayor to lead housing and homelessness initiatives in the city of Colorado Springs. And we know that we need a variety of housing options, right, that serve our workforce, our retirees, right, families. We need a variety of housing options that are accessible to people. And it's been a priority of this administration to help provide the leadership to make that possible. We also know that homelessness tends to increase. We'll see rises in homelessness in communities where it's not affordable to live. And so when housing costs go up, we also see increases in homelessness.
So that's why they're always linked.
Yes, the two are very much linked together.
So what's your background like? And talk about what you did for the city previously. And then I know you were away for a while and then came back. So what led you to this role?
Let me tell you, I feel like I have had the most charmed career working for the city of Colorado Springs. So, I'll go back a little ways here. I grew up in Colorado Springs. I didn't have in very challenging circumstances, and I didn't have a whole lot of prospects out of college or out of high school, and I didn't really even know how to get into college. And so I had a friend who helped me do that. He came and picked me up. I lived in Pikes Peak and Murray, and he would drive from Village 7 to Pikes Peak and Murray to pick me up to take me to UCCS so I could get started in a college education. And
wow, you owe that person a lot.
I know.
Yeah. It just takes one person, right?
It takes one person.
Yes, that's amazing.
And he just saw this potential. And I say that because I did really well when I got there. I did really well, and I really fell in love with problems. So I got first a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree in sociology. I worked for a Center for Community Development. But the skills I learned allowed me to get an entry-level position in local government, and starting in Parks and Recreation. And from there, I'm curious. Learning is my strength, and I just learned. So I started as a receptionist. And then how do you make the processes easier for people when you could see the problems that they were having, like making reservations for facilities. And then I would see, we have grant opportunities. I've freed up all this time by automating things. Can I apply for grants? I'm a good writer. And so I'd start applying for grants. And then I'd start convening community meetings. And then we created programs. And I would say that I'm most proud of the sort of vision we created for this community to preserve our mountain backdrop and have trails and parks. And I can see my work in those landscapes, right?
Every day.
Every day. And then I thought, wow, if we can do this kind of visionary work, when we create that sort of shared agenda in our community, those shared values, what could we do with other social problems?
Right.
And so I moved.
And that kind of led you to make that leap?
Yes.
Okay.
I went from Parks and Recreation to Housing and Community Development. And then I actually became an elected official in Manitou Springs to tackle some of those issues. Yeah, I was the mayor pro tem there for almost 4 years. And that, when we changed our form of government here, led me to a role as the administrator for the city council. Okay. Because, we had the strong mayor form of government.
Everything was changing.
Everything was changing. So I got to develop legislative systems. And from there, I had a great relationship with Mayor Steve Bach, because I was the liaison to that office. And he asked me one day about homelessness. He asked, why do we see so many people on the street? And I said, Because there's no place for people to go. We had one shelter. It was not large enough to serve folks.
No, I remember that.
And it had very high barriers to entry. Yep. So if you had drug issues or alcohol-related problems, if you had a pet, you couldn't get in. And so together he said, could you help fix that? And again, this love I have of solving problems, I said, absolutely, let's do this. And I moved then over here and worked for under both Steve Bach and John Suthers to do community development and address issues of homelessness.
And then you've really been along that vein since, right? Even when you left. So you left and went to is it San Diego?
Yeah, I went to San Diego, California. I got married, and my husband lived in San Diego, so we moved to San Diego. I worked for the Continuum of Care there, which is it's an organization. It's a regional organization that are endorsed by, created by HUD. To manage a continuum of care grant funds. And so continuums of care do regional planning around homelessness, and they maintain data systems. And so we have a continuum of care here.
Yes.
The Pikes Peak Continuum of Care.
That
does that work. So I worked as a strategy officer in, San Diego had one of the largest homeless populations in the populations of people experiencing homelessness in the country. And so I did that work. And then I moved into some private sector work that looked at housing and healthcare.
Okay, so you've really stayed in that same area, and this seems like a good fit. So far, so good? I mean, you have to say that here.
Yeah.
You're on the podcast. You have to say it's going really well. But
it is going well. I'm happy to be back. I mean, I think part of it, Colorado Springs gave me opened up a lot of opportunities for me here.
Yes.
And so the ability to come back, I have a daughter here. I have 2 grandchildren here. I have, a history, a lot of friends, and it was a great opportunity to come back and share skills that I've developed and ideas and bring that back to this community and, sort of work through what do we need to do next to improve outcomes for people who are at risk of or experiencing homelessness.
And shortly after you got here, I know that we released this homelessness plan. Maybe I'm not saying that the correct way. Homelessness response plan, action plan. So, and those are key words because we want to talk about what our response is and what actions we're going to take. And so can you kind of give us a brief overview? We don't have to get too in the weeds of what that action plan looks like, what it means for our community. So it's good. It's great timing that you're coming in and we're springing into action.
Yeah, that plan was largely developed before
prior to
me getting here. I think one of the neat things about the plan is that it leaned really heavily into community engagement. So there was a lot of community input, and the top priorities that came out of those sessions, which I think is so perfectly illustrates Colorado Springs, is priorities were enforcement and cleanup. Our community wants to be safe and wants to look good and be clean, and housing and services. But we also want to be compassionate and make sure people have access to the opportunities they need. And so those can often be seen as tensions in a community. But our community said we want to do both.
Well, and I would argue most people probably want both.
Yeah.
But maybe they're thinking that there's one side they have to pick, but you don't.
You don't. No, right. We can do both.
And we can want both. Yes.
So and so our areas, we're looking at again enforcement and cleanup, making sure that our community's safe, because a safe community will be a safe for everybody. So it's for residents who are concerned about the disorder that they see on the streets. It's also a concern for people who are experiencing homelessness, who are often victims of crimes. So we're focusing on that, keeping doing cleanup efforts. So we're not we're reducing the amount of trash and things that are accumulated when you see large encampments build up, and then using law enforcement to help connect folks to services.
Not just clean up the camps,
but connect to services. And where there are breaks in that system, that's where our department, Housing and Homelessness Response, is coming in to say, what are the gaps in this system and how can we fix them? So we have the law enforcement and cleanup. We have street outreach and availability of shelter and other types of housing, transitional housing, and even permanent housing that help meet the needs of people who are experiencing homelessness, and those needs can be very different depending on if you have a disability, you're suffering from certain, mental health disorders, if there's substance use issues, if it's just economic. If you have children, it's sometimes very hard to find housing for if you're
a large family.
A large family. So, so increasing our ability to outreach to people and create those need-based options. Employment is a big one here. We want people to, if you can work, let's help you reconnect to those opportunities. I fundamentally believe that people are naturally productive and they feel better when they're working and contributing and earning income. And I mean, it can be really devastating to be somebody who you lose everything and then your entire life feels like it's being controlled by other agencies and services. That agency from employment is really important. So we work with Work Colorado Springs, and we're looking at how do we expand opportunities for people who have been experiencing homelessness to come back into the workforce. We look at homelessness prevention and helping people bridge the gap. Again, if they find themselves, at risk of losing their housing because of cost, health care.
And that's a big percentage of our population that are right on that edge. Right, that are living on that edge.
Yeah, and so helping. Yeah. How do we help you provide? How can we help support affordable childcare? Right. How do we help connect to healthcare and mental health care services? If you're feeling like that is contributing to your instability,
right? So
that people are healthy and able to maintain that stability.
So it's really a multi-pronged approach, and I think sometimes people get impatient with that. Like they feel like, just fix it. And I don't really want to hear all the details. And it's like, well, if you're really going to understand the solution, fixing, like you talked about earlier, fixing the problem, you've got to know that there are all these different ways that we have to approach it and to focus in all those areas, because you can't let one of them go, right? You can't say no housing, no employment, no resources.
Right,
all of it's important. You can't just say public safety, we're good.
Right. You got to spin a lot of wheels, a lot of
and
plates
keep all this
at the same
collaboration
time.
going. And that's really our team's role, right? Because a lot of people think, of course, we can't make all this happen ourselves. We could never do that. We don't have the resources, nor is it our place, because we have specialists in all of these areas, right?
Right.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, and that is a really important piece, because there's an assumption that we're providing direct services out of this department, and we do not. We rely very, very much on partners to do the work. The city does have some programs. We have a homeless outreach team through CSPD. We have a homeless outreach program through the fire department. So we do provide some direct service. We do employ some folks in our public works department
for Work COS.
Through Work COS, through a temporary agency. But most of the work that we do is delivered by partners.
Yes.
It's delivered by an amazing group of people, shelter providers, mental health providers, housing providers.
We have people doing good work here.
Yeah, very good work.
Right.
And so a lot of what we do is we receive the majority of our budget comes through federal grants, and we redistribute that to meet the needs in our community. And so that involves a process of planning, and most of our grants come through housing and urban development. So that requires us to plan. We have to plan over 5 years, and then annually within those 5 years, and then deliver dollars to meet the needs, to have an impact, to close that gap in needs in our community.
I think a lot of people are hearing, they may hear about our homelessness response action plan, and they may think, how can I help? Or especially as we're in these cold winter months, a lot of people think, I see these people out in the cold. What is the best way for me personally as a resident to help them? What's your recommendation in terms of donations or volunteer time, or just getting involved, becoming more educated about the issue? We obviously have on our website, coloradosprings.gov/housing homelessness response. You can find out a lot of details there. But what do you recommend when people ask you, how can I help?
You know, there are a lot of agencies that work with volunteers.
Looking for volunteers,
yeah,
yes.
and look for volunteers. And there are certainly, financial contributions that could be made. And if you look especially at shelters, I mean, that's kind of prominent right now because of the cold weather and trying to save
you can
lives.
Individually,
yeah, there are things that
donate to them.
shelters need. If you want to donate goods instead of or
Money.
items instead of money, so that's an option.
Mayor was talking about that recently on the podcast after the really cold snap we had, and I know you were speaking about that too on our social media, was just, the things that were needed, like socks and hats and gloves and things like that. So typically you can find those on their website, what their current need is, and fulfill those requests.
Yeah, you can fulfill those requests. There's a big one though that a lot of this work, a lot of recovery from trauma, it could be homelessness in this case, we do it in relationship, right? And I walk to work, back and forth to work every day. I ride the bus, the ZEB circulator downtown.
Yes.
I love that. And I talk to a lot of people who are seeking shelter or experiencing homelessness, and really building that human connection. And I'll see people regularly, check in on them, and help them, just help bring that, humanize what can be seen sometimes as a really, people can be very fearful of some of the disorder that comes with homelessness especially when it's very visible. And I really seek to reach out and recognize that the humanity in people and build a relationship back and listen from people closest to the problem so that I can hear. Often people closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And so hear, what are your very specific needs and how can we be helping? And so, if you have friends, family, who are in need, experiencing that, it's good to reach out and have that relationship. I also recognize that I grew up in, again, very challenging circumstances, and I bring that lived experience into the work I do, and I share that very authentically, and how housing really, a college education, and then I purchased a home. I was able to purchase a home when I was about 28 years old to stabilize, and how that changed my life.
Because you, I assume, did not have that stability in your childhood?
No, I had, yeah. I mean, I think there's, that's a tough question, but because I think my mother did a really good job of creating some stability. We always paid for our housing first, so we got to have that stability. It's when I became a young adult and sort of was thrown into the complexities of that and then became a mom, I realized I needed a place. I needed a foundation to build a life from. And I found that by purchasing a home and then getting involved in my community and doing, again, that was the launch pad for a lot of the great work that I still see in this.
Well, you bring up a good point that there are lots of anchors like that, and they're not the same for everyone. But I mean, housing is one for some people, and like you said, employment is key.
Yes.
Relationships are key. I mean, if you have all those things and you have no one checking in on you, that's not good either. So it's like you do need those different type of anchors, and those different partners are so good at providing those different things. There's not somebody that's got the big solution, or every country in America would be using that solution now.
Every state would be.
So I know this is a hot button issue for people, but I appreciate you kind of diving in and talking about it.
Well,
with
and
us.
I appreciate that beautiful summary.
Oh, well, thanks.
I'm glad we recorded that. I'm going to write it down.
Okay, good. We'll use that in the future. But I know your team is doing great work. You guys are small but mighty, right? But
Yes.
doing really great partnerships and great work out in our community as our partners are too. So we're really grateful to you. And I hope so far so good. And you can come back and give us an update after a few more months on the job.
I would love to.
Okay, sounds good.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Well, everyone check out our website. We appreciate Amy, her team, and all the work they're doing for our community. And we appreciate your time listening to the podcast today.